Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to another episode of eDiscovery After Hours. This week's guest is Rich Robinson. Rich, of course, is a lovely person who many of you have probably heard on other podcasts or webinars or other industry outlets. But today we went deep on our shared family history in Ireland. We talked about coming from or raising a large family. We talked about being gluten-free or becoming a vegan. We talked about mentorship. We covered a lot of bases. It was a fantastic conversation, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. This week's sponsor is Discovery Master. Discovery Master automates reporting for budgets, QCs, key document findings, completion deadlines, and a whole lot more. To learn more about how to see all of your relativity data, no matter where it lives, with just one login, check out www.discoverymaster.co.
Quick time!
You don't know how to drink, your whole generation.
Drinks on the house.
Yes, sir.
No, wait a second. Drinks are 50% off.
Right.
No, wait a second. Double the price of everything.
And I work only 16 hours a day.
A union man only works 8 hours a day.
I belong to 2 unions.
And now, eDiscovery After Hours with your host, Ryan Short.
Well, Rich, welcome to eDiscovery After Hours. How are you?
Cheers, Ryan. I'm well, thanks. How are you?
I'm very well. What are we drinking this evening?
I am drinking a Jack and Coke. That's my kind of standard go-to.
I love it. Excellent.
Get it wherever I go.
It smells like college.
Doesn't it?
I was heading down to Bloomington for undergrad, and my aunt said, "Oh, does Bloomington still have sticky floors?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" Like, all the kids that spill their Jack and Coke and the floors get real sticky. And I was like, I don't know what that means. And then I went to Bloomington and I found out what it means. So yeah, it smells like Bloomington, Indiana. I love it.
Well, the funny thing is, a couple of years ago, I went to Ireland, and I was really interested in tasting Irish whiskeys, and I went to a bar there, and I said, "Listen, what do the locals drink? When they come in here, what do they ask for? Is it a Tullamore Dew? Is it what do they ask for? Oh, they ask for Jack Daniels."
I was told, I was at a bar in Dublin, and I was told it was Bud Light. And I was like, Bud Light? I go, that's bad beer in America. And the guy goes, I know, man. I don't make the rules. I just fill the drinks.
It's exotic there, I guess.
Yeah, it's exactly. Yeah, it's an import for them. Yeah, I did the distillery tour. So we did the Jack Daniel, or not Jack Daniels, the Jameson tour in Dublin. Or is it Dublin or is it Cork, Killarney? I can't remember. It all blends together.
It really does.
It was a good trip. I see you've got an Irish. I'm looking over here because you're on this.
Oh,
phone.
yes, yeah.
You've got your little Irish flag. Tell me more. So is this like a family trip, rediscover your roots?
That trip was that was my first trip actually outside of the United States. I'd been to Canada once just to go across the border for Niagara Falls as a kid. But that was the only time I'd been out of the U.S. before. So I went with my wife a couple of years ago, and that was my first trip out of the U.S. And it's actually the first trip I needed a passport for. And I just kind of did a tour, did B&Bs, and rented a car and just drove around Ireland, and I had a great time. And then about 2 years ago, my son graduated high school, and we did do that trip. So we traced our heritage back. Flew back to Rhode Island, picked up my dad. And so 3 generations of Robinsons flew over to Northern Ireland, where my family comes from. And then jumped across to Scotland and traced our roots back through the Gun clan. So that's incredible. That was a fun trip.
That's awesome. So I still have some distant relatives in Ireland. Most of my family came over. They stayed through the famine. They were all hungry, and they came over like early 1900s. But I still have some relatives there. And when I was connected to my grandma's cousin, and then her niece, and blah blah blah. And so we go and we get the address and we knock on the door, and Sheila opens and she goes, "Are you Jehovah's Witnesses?" And I laughed. I was like, "No, we're Catholic witnesses. I'm Ryan Short." And she's like, "Oh, come on in." And it was amazing. We literally, it couldn't have been more stereotypical. Like, we go in and we sit down. She had, they heated the home with peat moss into the stove.
Wow.
And she has tea and cookies. And she pulls out this like family photo album and is showing us like, "Oh, that's your uncle, that's your great grandma, that's your this, that's your that." And then she goes, we're in the middle of nowhere, right? Like,
Right.
My family's from Donegal up in the Northwest.
Okay.
And she goes, "Do you have a car?" And I was like, yeah, we have a car. And she goes, "Okay," because she's never learned to drive. And I'm like, "All right, that's fine." And she goes, "Let's go." I was like, "Okay." We get into the car and we drive even further into like Deliverance, Ireland territory. And we stop outside this farmhouse and she's like, "Wait right here." And my brother is with me and we're like, "Okay." And she goes up and she knocks on the door of this farmhouse. And then the guy comes out and they're pointing at the car and they're like laughing. And we're like, "Should we just leave now? Like, I don't know what's happening." And she goes, "Okay, park the car, come here." We walked to the back of the property and there were the stone remains of the home where my family lived for over 200 years. It was astonishing.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's my Ireland story.
That's incredible. And people, whenever I talk to people about Ireland trips, they always seem to have stories like that. So my story is that I found out through paperwork that my great grandfather, Samuel Robinson, or Robert Robinson, was baptized in this church in Enniskillen. And so we decided to just stop there. And I reached out to the church and said, we're going to be in town. I'm stopping in on this day. I wonder if somebody could, show me around. And they met us at the door of the church. They brought us back into the sacristy where they had these leather-bound books just all over this desk. And they said, have at it. And so, but they had actually done a little bit of work ahead of time and brought me to the page where my grandfather Samuel had signed the registry for the baptism of Robert, and the wedding journal was there, and all these ancient leather-bound books that were just there on the table for us to leaf through. Nobody was, they weren't behind any walls or glass, and then on the side of the sacristy on the wall, there was a map of the graveyard. And my father had been there before, but had not been able to get into the church at the time. Yeah. And in the map, there was they actually labeled where Samuel Robinson was buried. And he was too poor, so he didn't have his own gravestone. So my father never knew. He knew it was supposed to be there, but he didn't know. And so we saw it, and we were able to go out to his gravesite and stand there and sort of pay our respects. But then also in that book, it said that Samuel was a farmer in Carnmore, and we didn't know that at the time. So we asked the old gentleman there and said, what is Carnmore a place? Can we get to it? And he said, "Oh, Jesus, so what you going on to? You're going to go down the road." The whole, exactly what you expect from an Irish person giving directions. And so we followed these directions, and sure enough, there's this little trail off the side of the road that you can hike up. And at the top of this hill, there's a stone chair that says Carnmore, and you can sit in it like a throne and look over 7 counties.
Oh my God.
And see the land where they farmed for years.
That's wild. It
really is
so cool. And I'm a student of history and I love genealogy. And so to me, it was like truly and literally this religious experience, right? Yeah. Where you feel connected to the people who came before you. And I don't know what you thought about Ireland, but and maybe too, growing up in, I guess we'll kind of consider Rhode Island, New England, right? Kind of sort of.
It is New England, yeah.
I think there's parts of New England that feel this way too, where it's almost like a living history museum. It's kind of how I felt about Ireland, right? It was like, oh, they used to farm here. They used to make, sweaters here. They used to do this here. And it was just like, I kind of found myself enamored by the beauty and taken by kind of the history and the culture of the land. And also just like really sad about how it's like, oh, we used to do this. We used to have this vital, community. And now it's like, well, now everybody your age lives in Vancouver or Sydney. It's like, oh, well, that's kind of a bummer. But I thought too, like we romanticize Ireland here in America, this huge Irish diaspora. But it's like, I think about my own family, how terrible was life there that they literally got on a boat, sailed across the Atlantic, and then like walked to Indianapolis, Indiana in the early 1900s. Like life in Ireland must not have been as great as we thought. So thank God it seems to be better now. But but yeah, it was a very emotionally convoluted trip for me.
Yeah, no, I completely feel that. That was very true for me too. But driving around that country, looking at the beauty and how it has maintained its beauty over all these years. We would drive through these areas where they were these towns right on the water. And the fact that they were little cottages along the water just blew my mind, because real estate moguls would tear that apart in the United States. So the fact that they've maintained that beauty over these years was mind blowing to me.
Yeah,
and I just loved going to ancient historical sites that had been built 5,000 years ago. We don't really have that connection to here in the United States, right?
Yeah, that's true. Here in Indiana, we have they called them literally like mound Indians, right? These Native Americans who would build these large earthen mounds. But then there's like, I'm not exaggerating. This was, 1950s, 1960s urban renewal type of things. There's a place near me where they literally bulldozed a mound so they could put a parking lot for a shopping mall in. And it's like, America.
Horrifying.
So, yeah. Okay, so Rich, you are, there was an SNL sketch once where Kenan Thompson was playing Steve Harvey, and it was some made up game show. And one of the punchlines was how when he introduced the show, he was like, and now, Steve Harvey was like, now I can fulfill my duty of being on mute in every doctor's office in America. And I thought that was pretty funny. And I say this because my podcast may be the last one that you haven't been on. You're a man about town, so to speak, in the e-discovery space. And so your story is somewhat well known, right? Came out of New England. We're working. I guess I shouldn't tell it for you, but the Reader's Digest version is you went to run. So you were in social services of some sort, running a home for like disadvantaged youth or something, right? That's about right. So that is a very mission-driven. I would almost consider that a calling or a vocation, right? Not just a job.
Right.
So knowing that about you, and then you just brought up the fact that you thought to reach out to a church. For example, when you were traveling to Ireland, this call to service that you have, this very, I guess I'll call it, awareness of others, emotional intelligence, for whatever the term is as I think out loud here. Are you a man of faith? Is there some other impetus within you that drives you to want to care for others and serve others, or where do you think that comes from?
That's a good question. I hadn't really considered it. I had a Catholic education from kindergarten through college, right? I went to an all-boys Catholic high school. I went to Georgetown University, a Jesuit college. So certainly religion, faith, and that call to service was sort of ingrained in me through all of those years. I don't consider myself a religious person today. In fact, I think a lot of my personal theology or philosophy about religion comes from that background, that I had all that training in theology. I probably could have minored in theology in college because I still really enjoyed that subject. I took classes in science, myth, and religion, and comparative mythologies, and so So it was always a big interest of mine. In high school, I won the Religious Studies Award. I still have a medal that I got from school for the Religious Studies Award, and one of the vice principals, was Brother Cornell, tried to convince me multiple times to join the Brotherhood, but that was not my calling for sure. But yeah, I've always been drawn to service, and to some extent, I find that in my life today, I still try to get involved in volunteer activities, and I push it as much as I can. I push my team to join. Toyota is fantastic about pro bono and volunteer opportunities, and I just really love that about the company. And I really want my people to get involved and feel like they can join whatever service they're called to. CASA, for example, is one that team members of mine have been involved in, and so, but I find myself just at a point in my life where I've got 6 kids in 6 different schools, 3 of them colleges, 2 of them starting freshman year this year, and this job that is very fulfilling and a wonderful company, but also extremely busy. That I'm not able to fulfill that call to service. So it's been difficult for me. I look forward to the time where my life settles down a little bit and I can start getting involved in something that really is contributing to the community. But I'm not there at the moment.
Now, so you hinted at our next topic, which, for those who haven't been on the show or aren't routine listeners yet, there's no pre-vetted rehearsal. You don't have the list of questions, so you have no idea what I'm about to say. But we have 3 girls, 5 and under, and we have a 4th kid on the way. And so invariably we'll be out in public and somebody will be like, they think it's funny, I guess, right? But it's like, oh, are you Catholic or Mormon? And it's like, ha 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 ha, but Catholic, so you're kind of right. So 6 kids, I think that it is awesome. When do you sleep, and how did that? I guess your kids are older now; some are out of the house, so it's easier. But talk me through. This could be like a coaching session here. Talk me through how you kept your sanity and how you kept your wits about you raising 6 children. Because I'm 2/3 of the way there.
So we are a blended family. So we are the Brady Bunch. I've got 3 of hers and 3 of mine. The youngest one in curls. I only don't have I don't have an Alice, but if anybody wants to apply for the position, it's open.
It doesn't pay well, but great benefits.
That's right. There are lots of stories to tell anyway, if you want to blog. So, when my wife and I got married, her children were, I think, maybe I would say maybe 10, 8, and 4. So luckily I didn't have to see 6 all the way through infancy.
Yeah.
Because that would have been tough. But it's been great. I was very lucky in that the step siblings got along really well. My daughter, I had 2 boys and a girl, and when my ex-wife and I got divorced, she felt very sort of alone in 3 boys and her by herself. So I got remarried and brought these girls into her life. She was very happy about that.
Yeah.
And they got along really well. But the funny thing is that you raise these children and you feel like you do the same job, right? You give them the same amount of attention, you give them the same amount of love, you raise them the same way, and they all turn out completely different. It is amazing to me how different their personalities are. You would think that with 6, I'd have 2 that are similar, but not even close.
It's funny you say that. I'm the oldest of five, and my siblings and I recently were talking about the same thing. We came from, our parents are still together. So we grew up in the same household, same biological parents, same rules. Generally speaking, you get a little lax as you go down the line. You get tired, I guess. But all of us are so different. And if you put us on paper, right, like, what's your outlook on life? What are your values? Like a lot of these things, you would be like, oh yeah, these are clearly people from the same family. But then how our personalities manifest themselves and how we interact with others is so dramatically different. So it's funny to hear you say that too, since it was just a topic of conversation in our family. Are there any dynamics that come from that where it's like, oh, you sit down to family dinner, it's like, well, don't ask her about her day because she needs to process this. How does that all manifest itself when you guys are all close together? Is there some needling and teasing that goes on, or is it everybody?
Yeah. They're still siblings, right? So they pick on each other all the time, and even the step siblings get into it. They just can't help themselves. But it's funny, there are certain dynamics among the group where my two oldest get together and they start raising the volume of the conversation to a point that nobody can hear themselves think because they just keep talking over each other until one of them's the loudest. Usually the oldest, because he's the most skilled at that. But it goes along with that concept of each of them is their own individual person and they have their own personalities. I've got one child who considers himself a foodie who would go with me to the most obscure restaurant and try anything on the menu just to try it.
Yeah.
And I have another who is 17 years old and still only eats chicken nuggets, French fries, and spaghetti with just butter. Across the board, personality-wise, taste-wise, they're all just completely different individuals, which is exciting and fun too. I mean, it would be nice to be able to do the same thing. Dinners are crazy because my wife is gluten-free. I am vegan. Her oldest is vegetarian. I've got that one that wants to try anything and one that will not try anything. So dinners are always exciting. We've gotten to the point where actually we have a rule in the house that if you can eat the dinner that's put in front of you. You're allowed to refuse that dinner, but if so, you have to make yourself a peanut butter sandwich. You have no other option. Nobody's making another meal. Nothing else is happening. You are making your own peanut butter sandwich, and that's it.
Our girls, luckily, they're still young enough where it's like if you refuse, you're just going to bed hungry because I'm not making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Because our kids are young enough, if you set that precedent, that all they're ever going to want is what's not in front of them. Because there's going to be a veggie in that plate every night. So they're still blissfully unaware that that's even an option. Okay, so vegan, is this something that is a recent development? Does this happen? Is this happened a while ago? What led you to that?
Yeah, no, it was fairly recent. I had I guess I had tried a couple of different diets through the years. I've just gotten to the point where I felt like I was a little overweight and wanted to change. And so I tried a few things, keto and the like. And then I got a diagnosis of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which came completely out of the blue. There's no genetic connection, as far as I know, to it. And I looked it up, and there's really nothing you can do except lose weight. And so I started looking at options. And I watched What the Health on Netflix.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have, I've heard the story a lot. People watch that show, or Game Changers. That's another one that I hear about a lot, which I've also watched. And so I decided to try a plant-based diet, and I felt great when I did it. So
there you go.
So I kept it up.
But you live in Texas. I'm surprised that they didn't this new voting bill that they passed. Did they take away vegans' right to vote too, or do you have to move to Austin so that you can vote? You're the wrong city in Texas to be a vegan.
That's true. Although, Dallas is relatively blue, and so is Houston.
Yeah.
Even San Antonio, which is historically very conservative, is very blue. So
Yeah.
in the cities, you can find a lot. Not as much as I'd like, but
Yeah, well, so I had a series of health issues, and so back in late 2012, early 2013, I was became gluten free, and it was right when that became popular. And so I lived in a really, Chicago as a reputation as a conservative city, but like coming from small town Indiana, it felt like I moved to Berkeley,
yes.
So like every city was trying to or every restaurant was trying to out gluten-free the other restaurants. So I just got in at the right time. I jumped on that bandwagon right as the ship was taking off, to mix some metaphors there. So that was fantastic. Yeah. Well, so Rich, I always kind of tend to wrap these things up by saying, hey, this is a show about, it's people of the industry, not the work of the industry. But I'd always be remiss if I didn't ask folks, is there something e-discovery, or data governance or cybersecurity related that's on your mind, or something that you think deserves some airtime before we say goodbye?
I think that one of the things that I'm most interested in right now is actually not specifically about e-discovery itself or InfoGov or CyberSec. There's a lot of interesting thing happening in the industry. But I think the thing that I'm most passionate about at the moment, and maybe it has to do with that call to service, it's mentoring, right? It's helping people get into the industry and find their path. I was having a conversation, I think it was a conversation that I had with Tom and Rocky just recently, Tom O'Connor and Rocky Messing. And we were talking about the fact that, when I was coming up in the industry 20 years ago, it didn't exist. So we were learning everything. We were jacks of all trades, right? So we would get our hands dirty in learning databases and building lit support databases and Zprint and iPro and all of them were really complicated. And so a lot of it was, hands-on and really getting to learn it. Well, nowadays, when you're hired into the industry, you tend to be in a very specific role. So I just am a big fan of mentoring people and helping them sort of find the path that is most interesting to them. There's so many ways that you can take this e-discovery space and expand it into other areas of like we mentioned, infogovernance or cybersecurity or privacy or the like. So that means a lot to me right now. So which is why I'm part of, I'm on the board of the Dallas chapter of ACEDS, and I'm interested. I'm on CLOC, I'm in ACC. I'm really interested in expanding people's horizons when it comes to education in the space.
Yeah. Well, and I can tell you firsthand, I appreciate that, not just like in a polite podcast host way of saying that, but that's actually how you and I first connected. I was brand new to the space, and it was when COVID first started. I'm not an attorney. I have no background in legal. And I was coming out of business school and was, these attorneys were looking for somebody to help them commercialize this product. And so I literally spent 30 days in a card table in my master bedroom closet, listening to podcasts, watching webinars, reading every page of edrm.net. They got a lot of content, by the way. And I come up for air and I get on LinkedIn, and this guy, in Texas named Rich says, hey, if you're new to the industry and you're just looking to bounce some ideas off somebody or ask some questions, put some time on my calendar. Let's talk. And so I messaged you and I go, hi, you don't know me from Adam, but I'd love to take you up on that offer. And it was fantastic. And I was so grateful because you didn't have to do that. And so big kudos to you for, walking the walk. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's indebted to you for, for the kind time that you've taken to spend time with we rookies. So cheers to you.
I'm happy to do it. Cheers.
Awesome. Well, Rich, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure. And thanks to everybody for stopping by and taking a listen this week.
Thanks, Ryan. Bye, everyone.